The gunshot that killed Beatrice Sullivan's husband on their wedding night echoed through her dreams every time she closed her eyes, but nothing compared to the silence that followed when she realized she was 3 months pregnant and completely alone in a world that had no mercy for widows. Fairplay, Colorado, 1876. The mountain air cut through Beatrice's thin shawl as she stood outside the general store, staring at the help wanted sign with blurred vision. Her fingers trembled as she pressed them against her still flat stomach, a secret she had kept hidden for weeks now. The proprietor had turned her away minutes ago, his eyes lingering on her black mourning dress with something between pity and suspicion. A young widow with no family and no references was not the kind of employee respectable businesses wanted, no matter how desperately she needed work. 3 months had passed since Thomas fell to the floor of their rented room above the saloon, blood pooling beneath him while their wedding supper grew cold on the table. 3 months since the sheriff ruled it a robbery gone wrong, though nothing had been taken except her husband's life and her future. 3 months of watching her small savings dwindle while the baby inside her grew, a ticking clock toward destitution. Miss Sullivan. A deep voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. Beatrice turned to find a tall man with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of storm clouds watching her with concern. He wore dusty trail clothes and a worn hat pushed back from his forehead, revealing dark hair that fell past his collar. A cowboy, clearly, though something in the way he carried himself suggested he was more than just another drifter passing through the mining town. Mrs. Sullivan, she corrected automatically, though the title felt hollow now. Her hand moved instinctively to the thin gold band on her finger. Nathan Jenkins, madam. He touched the brim of his hat respectfully. I couldn't help but notice you've been standing out here in the cold for near about 20 minutes. Are you all right? The genuine concern in his voice almost broke her composure. She had grown so accustomed to suspicious glances and whispered gossip that simple kindness felt like a shock to her system. I'm perfectly fine, Mr. Jenkins. Just taking some air. His gray eyes studied her face, and she knew he could see the lie. Her cheeks were hollow from skipped meals, and the dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights. Forgive me for being forward, madam, but you don't look fine. You look like someone who needs help. I don't need charity. The words came out sharper than she intended, pride flaring even as her stomach cramped with hunger. Wasn't offering charity, Nathan said calmly. I'm looking to hire someone, actually. I've got a ranch about 5 miles outside town, and my cook just up and left to follow some prospector to California. I've got 15 ranch hands who are about ready to mutiny if they have to eat my attempt at beans one more time. Beatrice's heart stuttered. You want to hire me as a cook? Can you cook? I can. It wasn't a lie. Her mother had taught her well before the fever took both her parents when Beatrice was 16. She had kept house for an elderly aunt in Denver until the woman passed, leaving Beatrice alone at 22. That was when she met Thomas, a charming gambler who promised her security and love. He had delivered on the love, at least, in the 6 weeks between their wedding and his death. Then I'm offering you a job, Mrs. Sullivan. Room and board included, plus $30 a month. The bunkhouse has a separate room that was meant for the cook. It's small but private, with a good lock on the door. $30 a month. It was more than she could have hoped for, enough to save for when the baby came, but something in his offer made her suspicious. Men did not simply offer vulnerable women jobs with private rooms unless they expected something in return. Why would you hire me? You don't know anything about me. Nathan met her gaze steadily. I know you're standing in the cold looking at a help wanted sign like it's your last hope. I know you're wearing mourning clothes that are starting to wear thin at the cuffs. I know you've got the look of someone who's been knocked down by life and is trying real hard to get back up. That's enough for me. And what would you expect in return?" She kept her voice level, but her jaw was tight. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked like sadness. "I'd expect good meals served 3 times a day and a kitchen kept clean. Nothing more, Mrs. Sullivan. I'm not that kind of man, and any hand who tried anything would be off my ranch before sunset. You have my word on that." Beatrice wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him, but trust had become a luxury she could no longer afford. "I don't know you, Mr. Jenkins." "No, you don't," he agreed. "So how about this? Come out to the ranch, see the place, meet the hands. If you don't feel safe, I'll drive you back to town myself, no questions asked. But at least give yourself the chance to consider it." She should say no. Every bit of caution she had learned in her 23 years told her not to go anywhere with a strange man. But caution would not feed her or the baby growing inside her. Caution would not keep a roof over her head when her landlord inevitably demanded payment she could not provide. "All right," she heard herself say. "I'll come see the ranch." Relief crossed Nathan's face, and she realized he had genuinely been worried about her. "My wagon's just down the street. Let me help you get your things." "I don't have much." An understatement. Everything she owned fit in a single carpet bag in her rented room. 20 minutes later, Beatrice sat beside Nathan on the wagon seat as they rolled out of Fairplay. The September sun was warm on her face, though the breeze still carried the bite of the coming winter. The mountains rose around them in shades of gold and green, aspens turning with the season. Under different circumstances, she might have found it beautiful. "How long have you had the ranch?" she asked, more to fill the silence than from genuine curiosity. "Going on 4 years now." Bought it from a prospector who decided he'd rather chase gold than raise cattle. "Most folks thought I was crazy, paying good money for land when I could have just claimed some. But the house was already built, and the grazing is good." He kept his eyes on the trail ahead, giving her space to study him without feeling pressured. He was younger than she had first thought, probably not much past 30. His hands on the reins were scarred and calloused from hard work, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin. There was something solid about him, reliable, that made her want to trust him despite her better judgment. "Were you in the war?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Nathan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I was. Fought for the Union, mustered out in '65. Worked cattle drives for a few years after, saved my money and bought this place." Beatrice nodded. Thomas had been too young for the war, only 14 when it ended, but he had lost 2 older brothers to it. Sometimes she wondered if that loss was what had driven him to live so recklessly, as if he knew his time would be short anyway. The ranch appeared as they crested a rise, and Beatrice felt her breath catch. It was not grand, but it was substantial. A 2-story house with a covered porch dominated the main yard, with a large barn, bunkhouse, and several outbuildings spreading around it. Cattle dotted the grasslands beyond, and she could see horses in a corral near the barn. It looked prosperous and well-maintained, the kind of place that spoke of steady work and careful management. "It's bigger than I expected," she admitted. "I've been building it up," Nathan said with quiet pride. "Started with 50 head of cattle, now I've got near about 200. Added the 2nd story to the house last year, though it's still mostly empty rooms. Seemed foolish to have all that space with just me, but I figured someday it might be useful." He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the bunkhouse, and immediately men began emerging from various buildings. They were a rough-looking crew, as ranch hands usually were, but they regarded Nathan with obvious respect. That told her more about him than any words could have. "Boys, this is Mrs. Sullivan. She's considering taking over the cooking, so I want you all on your best behavior." Nathan's voice carried clear authority. "Mrs. Sullivan, these are my hands. They're a decent bunch when they're not complaining about my cooking." A grizzled older man with a gray beard stepped forward. "Madam, if you can make anything better than what we've been eating, you'll have our eternal gratitude. I'm Hank, been with Nathan since he bought this place." Beatrice managed a small smile. "I'll certainly try, Mr. Hank." "Just Hank, madam," he grinned, revealing a missing tooth. "Come on, I'll show you the kitchen while Nathan puts the wagon away." The kitchen was larger than she expected, with a good stove, plenty of workspace, and shelves stocked with basic supplies. The room attached to it was indeed small, barely big enough for a bed, dresser, and washstand, but it had a window that looked out over the mountains and that promised lock on the door. After months of living in a single rented room above a noisy saloon, it felt like a palace. "What do you think?" Nathan had appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. Beatrice ran her hand over the smooth counter, feeling the solid wood beneath her palm. This was real. This was a chance. "When would you need me to start? Is tomorrow too soon?" She thought of her landlord's increasingly pointed remarks about the rent, of the shopkeepers who watched her with suspicious eyes, of the constant gnawing fear that kept her awake at night. Tomorrow would be perfect. Something in Nathan's expression softened. "I'll drive you back to town to get your things and settle your accounts. You can start fresh in the morning." The word fresh felt like a lie. She would never be fresh or new again. The grief and fear had marked her permanently, carved channels through her soul that would never smooth over. But maybe she could be something else. Maybe she could be surviving. That night, in her rented room for the last time, Beatrice placed her hand on her stomach and whispered to the child growing there, "We're going to be all right. I don't know how yet, but we're going to survive this." She did not let herself hope for more than survival. Hope was too dangerous, too painful when it was inevitably crushed. But survival she could fight for. The next morning, Nathan arrived just after dawn to collect her. The early light turned the mountains gold, and Beatrice allowed herself to believe this might be a new beginning, even if it was not the one she had dreamed of. The first week at the ranch passed in a blur of work. Beatrice rose before dawn to start breakfast, cooked 3 large meals a day for 17 hungry men, and fell into bed each night too exhausted to dream. It was hard, physical work, but it was honest and it kept her hands busy. More importantly, it kept her mind occupied. When she was elbow-deep in bread dough or stirring a pot of stew, she could not dwell on everything she had lost. The ranch hands treated her with careful respect, never getting too close or speaking too familiarly. She suspected Nathan had laid down strict rules, and she was grateful for it. Hank appointed himself her unofficial protector, always nearby when she needed heavy lifting done or supplies brought in from the storage shed. Nathan himself was a constant, steady presence. He took his meals with the hands in the bunkhouse dining area, always thanking her for the food and asking if she needed anything. He never pried into her past or asked personal questions. He simply treated her like a valued employee with dignity and respect. It was that respect that slowly began to unravel her careful defenses. 2 weeks into her employment, Beatrice was peeling potatoes in the kitchen when a wave of dizziness struck her. She gripped the counter, waiting for it to pass, but instead her stomach lurched violently. She barely made it outside before she was sick behind the kitchen steps. "Mrs. Sullivan," Nathan's voice was full of concern. She had not heard him approach. Beatrice wiped her mouth with shaking hands, humiliation burning through her. "I'm fine. Something I ate must not have agreed with me. You cooked everything we ate and none of the rest of us are sick." He crouched beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence. "How long have you been with child?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She looked up at him with wide eyes, her carefully constructed walls crumbling. "How did you know?" "I grew up on a farm. I recognized the signs." His voice was gentle, without judgment. "Does anyone else know?" "No." The word came out as barely a whisper. "I haven't told anyone. I thought I could hide it longer, save more money before people realized." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes thoughtful. "Did your husband know before he died?" Fresh grief rose in her throat. "No. I didn't know myself until after. We were only married 6 weeks." She laughed, a broken sound. 6 weeks of happiness, and now I have a lifetime of consequences." "A child isn't a consequence," Nathan said firmly. "A child is a blessing, even when the circumstances are difficult." "Easy for you to say. You're not a widow carrying a baby with no family and no prospects." The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. "I'll never be whole again, Mr. Jenkins. My husband is dead, my reputation is in tatters, and I'm broken in ways that can't be fixed. Once people realize I'm expecting, I'll lose even this job. No one wants a pregnant cook." Nathan stood, and for a horrible moment she thought he was going to fire her right then. Instead, he offered his hand to help her up. "Then let me love your broken pieces." Beatrice stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" "You're not broken, Mrs. Sullivan. You're hurting, and there's a difference. But even if you were broken into 1,000 pieces, that wouldn't change the fact that you're one of the strongest people I've ever met." He kept his hand extended, patient. "You're not going to lose this job. Not now, not when the baby comes, not ever if you don't want to. I mean that." "Why?" She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet, confused by his kindness. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because everyone deserves a chance. Because I've been knocked down by life too, and I remember what it felt like when someone gave me a hand up." He released her hand but held her gaze. "Because from the moment I saw you standing outside that store, looking so lost and so determined at the same time, I wanted to help you. And maybe because I'm tired of being alone in that big house, and I think you might be tired of being alone too." Beatrice's heart was pounding. "I don't understand what you're saying." "I'm saying I'd like to court you properly if you'd allow it. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people getting to know each other and seeing if maybe we could build something good from all this pain we've both been carrying." Nathan's voice was steady, but she could see vulnerability in his eyes. "I'm saying that baby you're carrying deserves a father who'll love them, and you deserve a husband who'll cherish you. I'd like to be both those things if you'll have me. You don't even know me." But even as she said it, Beatrice felt something unfurling in her chest, something dangerous that felt like hope. "Then let me get to know you. Let me prove that not all men will leave you broken and alone." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "I'm a patient man, Beatrice. I can wait as long as you need." She should say no. It was too fast, too complicated. She was still wearing mourning clothes for her dead husband, still carrying Thomas's child. But when she looked at Nathan, she did not see pity or obligation. She saw genuine caring and the promise of safety. "All right," she said softly, but slowly. "I'm not ready for anything more than friendship right now." "Friendship is a fine place to start." Nathan's smile widened. "Now let's get you some ginger tea for that nausea. My mother swore by it when she was expecting." As he led her back into the kitchen, chatting easily about home remedies and ranch business, Beatrice felt the tight knot of fear in her chest loosen just slightly. Maybe she would never be whole again in the way she had been before Thomas died. But maybe, just maybe, she could be something different, something stronger. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Beatrice had experienced with Thomas. Where Thomas had been all grand gestures and passionate declarations, Nathan was steady and thoughtful. He brought her wildflowers from the meadows and asked about her childhood. He taught her to ride the gentle mare he kept for ranch errands and listened when she talked about her fears for the future. He never pushed for more than she was willing to give, content to sit on the porch in the evenings and watch the sunset while they talked about everything and nothing. A month into their courtship, Beatrice finally told him about the night Thomas died. They were sitting by the small stream that ran through the ranch property, the October air crisp and clean. Nathan had brought her out here after lunch, insisting she needed a break from the hot kitchen. Now they sat on a fallen log, watching the water flow past. "We were supposed to have dinner together, just the two of us," Beatrice began, her voice distant. "It was our wedding night and Thomas had won big at cards the night before. He was so excited, talking about all the things we could do with the money. Buy a little house, start a proper life together." She twisted her wedding ring around her finger. Someone knocked on the door. "Thomas told me to wait in the bedroom, that he'd handle it. I heard voices, his and someone else's, but I couldn't make out the words. Then there was a gunshot." Nathan's hand found hers, warm and solid. "By the time I got the bedroom door open, Thomas was on the floor and the other man was gone. I never saw his face. Thomas died in my arms before I could even call for help." Tears streamed down her face, the first she had allowed herself to cry in front of anyone since that night. "The sheriff said it was a robbery, that someone must have known Thomas won money, but nothing was taken, Nathan. The money was still in his pocket. His watch was still on his wrist. Whoever killed him wasn't after his possessions." "Did Thomas have enemies?" Nathan asked carefully. "Gambling debts, maybe. I don't know. We hadn't known each other that long before we married. He never talked about his past much, always said he wanted to focus on our future." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out we didn't have a future at all." Nathan was quiet for a moment, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on the back of her hand. "Do you think the sheriff investigated properly?" "I think the sheriff saw a dead gambler and a new widow and decided it wasn't worth his time. No one cares about justice for men like Thomas." The anger in her voice surprised her. She had not realized how much resentment she had been carrying. "I care," Nathan said firmly. "If you want, I can ask around, see if anyone knows anything. I've got connections in town, people who might talk to me who wouldn't talk to the sheriff." Beatrice looked at him, this man who barely knew her but was offering to seek justice for a husband he had never met. "Why would you do that?" "Because it matters to you. Because that baby deserves to know their father didn't die for nothing." He squeezed her hand gently. "Because I'm falling in love with you, Beatrice Sullivan, and I can't stand seeing you carry this pain alone." Her breath caught. "Nathan, you can't love me, you barely know me. I know you're brave and stubborn and kind. I know you make the best biscuits I've ever tasted, and you hum when you're kneading bread. I know you're terrified of the future, but you face each day anyway. I know you talk to your baby at night when you think no one can hear, promising them you'll be strong enough for both of you." His gray eyes were intense. "I know enough to know I want to know everything else. I'm carrying another man's child." She had to make him understand the impossibility of what he was suggesting. "I know, and I'll love that child like my own if you'll let me." Nathan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "I meant what I said that first day, Beatrice. You don't have to be whole. You just have to be willing to let me love all of you, broken pieces and all." Beatrice closed her eyes, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. She had built such careful walls around her heart, convinced that loving again would only lead to more pain. But Nathan was patient and gentle, and he was offering her something she had thought was lost forever. He was offering her hope. "I'm so scared," she whispered. "I'm scared that if I let myself love you, something will happen and I'll lose you too. I don't think I could survive that again." I can't promise nothing will ever happen, Nathan said honestly. Life is uncertain, and this is a hard land. But I can promise that I'll do everything in my power to come home to you every single day. I can promise that you and that baby will always be safe and cared for. I can promise that I'll love you with everything I have for as long as I have. He turned her face gently toward him with his free hand. That's all any of us can promise, Beatrice, but I think it might be enough. She searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or deception. All she found was steady, honest affection and the kind of determination that had built a successful ranch from nothing. I think I could love you too, she admitted, the words feeling both terrifying and freeing. I think maybe I already do. Nathan's smile was brilliant. Then that's enough for now. We'll figure out the rest as we go. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Beatrice felt something inside her shift and settle. She was not healed, not whole, but she was beginning to believe that maybe she did not need to be. Maybe being broken and being loved were not mutually exclusive. As November arrived, bringing cold winds and the first dustings of snow to the mountain peaks, Nathan made good on his promise to investigate Thomas's death. He spent his trips to town, asking quiet questions and following thin leads. Beatrice tried not to let herself hope for answers, but she found herself waiting anxiously for his reports nonetheless. I talked to the bartender at the saloon below your old room, Nathan told her one evening as they sat in the kitchen after dinner. The hands had all retired to the bunkhouse, leaving them alone. He remembers that night, said Thomas came down about an hour before the shooting looking nervous, met with a man in the corner booth. Beatrice leaned forward. Did he know who the man was? Dark suit, fancy clothes, not local. The bartender thought maybe he was connected to one of the big mining operations, or maybe one of the gambling outfits that run games in Denver. Nathan's expression was grim. Beatrice, I think Thomas might have been involved in something bigger than friendly card games. The bartender said Thomas looked scared. Thomas never mentioned anything like that to me. But even as she said it, Beatrice remembered odd moments. Thomas leaving at strange hours, his mood swings between elation and anxiety, the way he sometimes checked over his shoulder when they walked through town. What do you think it means? I think your husband might have gotten mixed up with some dangerous people. Card cheating, maybe, or information trading. These mining towns attract all kinds of schemes, and a clever gambler could make good money selling information to the right buyers. Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. I'm sorry, Beatrice. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. No, she agreed. But it's better than not knowing. At least now it makes sense why the sheriff didn't investigate. If Thomas was involved in something illegal, the sheriff probably figured he got what was coming to him. That doesn't make it right. Nathan's jaw was tight with anger. Murder is murder, regardless of what the victim might have done. Beatrice felt oddly numb. She had loved Thomas, or thought she did, but she was beginning to realize how little she had actually known him. Their whirlwind courtship and quick marriage had been built on attraction and promises, not on true understanding. Do you think we'll ever find out who killed him? I'm going to keep trying, Nathan promised. But Beatrice, I need you to be careful. If Thomas was mixed up with dangerous people, and if they think he might have told you something important, you could be in danger too. A chill ran down her spine. I don't know anything. Thomas never told me about his business. They might not believe that. Nathan squeezed her hand. That's part of why I'm glad you're here, where I can keep you safe. Just promise me you'll be cautious when you go to town and you'll always take someone with you. I promise. She looked down at their joined hands, marveling at how natural it felt. Nathan, thank you for doing this. For caring about what happened to Thomas even though you never knew him. I'm not doing it for Thomas, Nathan said quietly. I'm doing it for you and the baby. You both deserve to know the truth and you deserve justice." That night, lying in her small bed with her hand on her growing belly, Beatrice thought about the strange turns her life had taken. 6 months ago, she had been a new bride full of hope and dreams. Now she was a widow carrying one man's child while falling in love with another. It should have felt wrong, disloyal somehow. But instead it felt like coming home. The baby kicked for the first time 2 weeks later, a fluttering sensation that made Beatrice gasp with wonder. She was in the kitchen, rolling out pie crust when she felt it. Without thinking, she ran to find Nathan. He was in the barn, checking on a horse that had thrown a shoe that morning. "Nathan," she called, slightly breathless from hurrying. He emerged from the stall immediately, concern on his face. "What's wrong? Is it the baby?" The baby kicked. She was grinning, she realized, grinning so wide her cheeks hurt. Just now in the kitchen, the baby kicked. The concern melted into joy. "That's wonderful. That means everything is progressing well. You want to feel?" The offer came out before she could second-guess it. Nathan's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" In answer, Beatrice took his hand and placed it on her belly, over the spot where she had felt the movement. They stood there for a long moment, waiting. Just when Beatrice was starting to think the baby had gone still, there was another flutter, stronger this time. Nathan's face lit up with awe. "I felt it. That's amazing." "That's your son or daughter saying hello," Beatrice said softly. The words felt significant, an acknowledgement of what they were building together. "Hello, little one," Nathan murmured, his hand still pressed gently to her belly. "I'm going to love you so much." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes. This moment, standing in a barn with a man she had known only a few months, feeling her baby move beneath his hand, felt more intimate and real than her entire marriage to Thomas had been. It was not the life she had planned, but it was good. It was real. December brought heavy snow to the high country around Fairplay. The ranch work became harder, with ice to break in water troughs and cattle to feed through the drifts. Beatrice's pregnancy was becoming obvious now, her dresses straining at the seams. Nathan insisted she cut back her work hours and hired a young man from town to help with the heavy kitchen tasks. "I can still work," Beatrice protested when Nathan announced this plan. "I know you can, but you shouldn't have to do everything yourself, especially not now." Nathan was using his calm, reasonable voice, the one that made it hard to argue with him. "Besides, young Billy needs the work and you need the help. Everyone wins." Billy turned out to be a cheerful 18-year-old with more enthusiasm than skill, but he was willing to learn, and he treated Beatrice with respectful deference. With his help, she found herself with more free time than she had had in months. Nathan used that time to teach her about the ranch. He showed her the account books, explaining how he tracked expenses and income. He took her out to check fence lines and count cattle. He introduced her to every aspect of the operation, and Beatrice slowly realized what he was doing. He was preparing her to be a full partner, not just an employee or even just a wife. "Why are you teaching me all this?" she asked one afternoon as they rode back from checking the north pasture. The cold air stung her cheeks, but she felt exhilarated rather than uncomfortable. "Because this ranch will be yours too if you marry me," Nathan said simply. "I want you to know how everything works. I want you to be able to manage it yourself if you need to. If I marry you," she latched onto the conditional. "I thought we were courting." "We are." Nathan kept his eyes on the trail ahead, but she could see color rising in his cheeks. "But I'm a practical man, Beatrice. I know you'll need to make a decision soon before the baby comes. I don't want you to feel pressured, but I also want you to know that my offer stands. I'll marry you tomorrow if you'll have me, or I'll wait until you're ready, or I'll be your friend and employer if that's all you can give me. But I wanted you to understand what I'm offering." Not just a name for the baby, but a real partnership, a real life together. Beatrice's heart was pounding. They had been dancing around this conversation for weeks, both of them aware that time was running short. What if I can never love you the way you deserve? What if I'm too damaged from everything that happened? Nathan finally turned to look at her, his gray eyes intense. You already love me. I can see it in the way you smile when I walk into a room, in the way you save the corner piece of cornbread, because you know it's my favorite, in the way you lean into me when we sit together in the evenings. You might not love me the same way you love Thomas, but that's all right. I don't want to be Thomas. I want to be Nathan, the man who loves you exactly as you are. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm terrified of losing someone again, of trusting my heart to someone who might leave me. Then we'll be scared together. Nathan reached over and took her gloved hand. Marry me, Beatrice. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Because you believe we could build something good together. Because you trust me enough to try. Beatrice looked at him, really looked at him. At his honest face and steady eyes. At the strength in his shoulders and the gentleness in his hands. At the man who had offered her sanctuary when she had nowhere else to go, who had courted her patiently without pressuring her, who had promised to love her baby as his own. At the man she had fallen in love with despite all her fears and defenses. Yes, she said, the word coming out clear and sure. Yes, I'll marry you. Nathan's smile could have lit up the whole mountain range. He leaned over in his saddle and kissed her, cold lips and warm hearts, and Beatrice felt something settle deep in her soul. This was right. This was home. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Fairplay, with Hank and a few of the ranch hands as witnesses. Beatrice wore a simple green dress that accommodated her growing belly, and Nathan wore his best suit. The ceremony was short and uncomplicated, but when Nathan slipped a gold band onto her finger to sit beside Thomas's ring, Beatrice felt tears stream down her face. I promise to love you and care for you all the days of my life, Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. I promise to be a good father to your baby and a good husband to you. I promise to build a life with you that's full of more joy than sorrow. I promise to trust you with my broken pieces, Beatrice replied, the vows they had written together feeling sacred. I promise to let you love me, even when I'm scared. I promise to build this life with you, one day at a time. The kiss that sealed their marriage was sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Beatrice realized she was smiling, genuinely smiling, for the first time since Thomas died. The hands had decorated the bunkhouse dining room with pine boughs and candles, and they held a small celebration with cake and cider. Hank made a toast that had everyone laughing and wiping away tears, and Billy played surprisingly good fiddle while the hands danced and sang. It was not fancy or elaborate, but it was warm and genuine, full of the kind of community Beatrice had not realized she had been missing. That night, in the big house that was now officially hers too, Nathan carried her over the threshold despite her laughing protests about her weight. He set her down gently in the front hall and just held her for a long moment, his chin resting on top of her head. "Welcome home, Mrs. Jenkins," he murmured. Beatrice pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the scent of him, soap and leather and something that was uniquely Nathan. "I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I said yes. So am I." He pulled back to look at her face, his expression serious. "Beatrice, I want you to know that there's no expectations for tonight, or any night. We'll take this at whatever pace you need." She had been worried about this, about the physical aspect of marriage that she associated with Thomas, and that one night that had ended in tragedy. But looking at Nathan now, seeing the patience and understanding in his eyes, she felt something different. Not fear, but curiosity. Not obligation, but desire. "I think I'd like to try," she said softly. "If you'll be patient with me." Nathan cupped her face in his hands and kissed her forehead. "Always. We have all the time in the world." He led her upstairs to the main bedroom, the one Beatrice had never entered before. It was spacious and simply furnished, with a large bed covered in quilts and a fireplace that Nathan must have lit earlier because it was warm and inviting. He had even put flowers on the dresser, dried wildflowers that must have been saved from the fall. They undressed shyly, helping each other with buttons and laces, and when Nathan saw her swollen belly for the first time, he placed his hands on it reverently. "You're beautiful," he said, and she believed him. Their lovemaking was slow and gentle, nothing like the passionate but hurried encounters she had shared with Thomas. Nathan was careful with her, always checking that she was comfortable, that she was with him. And Beatrice discovered that intimacy could be about more than just physical pleasure. It could be about trust and connection, about two people choosing to be vulnerable together. Afterward, lying in Nathan's arms with her head on his chest, Beatrice felt something she had not felt since before Thomas died. She felt safe. She felt cherished. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she could be whole again after all. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Nathan's voice was drowsy and content. "For loving my broken pieces, for being patient, for giving me a reason to hope again." His arms tightened around her. "Thank you for trusting me, for letting me love you, for giving me a family." Beatrice placed her hand over his where it rested on her belly. "Our family," she corrected. "This baby is ours now." "Ours," Nathan agreed, and Beatrice heard the wonder in his voice. She fell asleep feeling more at peace than she had in months, the steady rhythm of Nathan's heartbeat beneath her ear like a lullaby promising better days ahead. The winter deepened, and Beatrice's pregnancy advanced. By January, she was large and uncomfortable, moving slowly and tiring easily. Nathan hovered like a mother hen, constantly asking if she needed anything and forbidding her from doing any heavy work. She complained about his overprotectiveness, but secretly loved the attention. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one afternoon when he insisted on carrying a basket of laundry that could not have weighed more than 10 pounds. "I know, but humor me anyway. I like taking care of you." He set the basket down in their bedroom and pulled her close, his hands spanning the small of her back. "Besides, the baby will be here soon, and then you'll be too busy to let me fuss over you. You're probably right about that." Beatrice leaned into him, grateful for the support. Her back had been aching all day. "Nathan, what if I'm not a good mother? What if I don't know what to do?" "Then we'll figure it out together. Neither of us has done this before, but we'll learn." He kissed the top of her head. "You're going to be a wonderful mother, Beatrice. I've watched you nurture this whole ranch. You'll do the same for our baby, our baby." She loved hearing him say it that way, claiming the child as his own without hesitation. "Have you thought more about names?" They had been discussing this for weeks without settling on anything. Nathan wanted something traditional, while Beatrice found herself drawn to names that meant strength or hope. "I have, actually." Nathan guided her to sit on the edge of the bed, then knelt to remove her shoes, rubbing her swollen ankles gently. "What about Benjamin if it's a boy?" "It means son of my right hand, a source of strength." "Benjamin Jenkins," Beatrice tested the name. "I like that. What about for a girl?" "Grace," Nathan said immediately. "Because that's what you've shown me. Grace under impossible circumstances. Grace in the face of loss. Grace that's brought us both to this moment." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes as they did so easily these days. "Grace Jenkins, that's perfect. Then we have a plan." Nathan moved to sit beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders. "Though I suspect the baby will tell us what they want to be called when they get here. Babies have a way of making their preferences known." Beatrice laughed, then winced as the baby kicked hard against her ribs. "This one certainly does. I swear they're training to be a boxer in there. Or a rancher, getting ready to wrangle cattle." Nathan placed his hand where she was rubbing, and immediately the baby kicked against his palm. "Hey there, little one. Take it easy on your mama. She's working hard to get you here safely." "I don't think they're listening," Beatrice said, but she was smiling. These moments, feeling the baby move while Nathan talked to them, were becoming her favorites. They made everything feel real and right. That night, Beatrice woke to cramping pain that took her breath away. For a moment she lay still, trying to assess what was happening. Then the pain came again, stronger, and she realized with a jolt of fear and excitement that this was it. The baby was coming. "Nathan," she said, shaking his shoulder. "Nathan, wake up." He was alert immediately, years of ranching making him quick to respond to trouble. "What's wrong?" "The baby's coming. I've been having pains." Nathan was out of bed and lighting the lamp in seconds. "How far apart are the pains?" "I don't know. I just woke up." Another wave of cramping hit and Beatrice gripped the sheets. "Nathan, I'm scared." "I know, sweetheart, but you're strong and we're going to get through this." He was pulling on his pants, moving with quick efficiency. "I'm going to ride to town and get the midwife. Hank's wife Mary has helped with births before. I'll send her over while I fetch the midwife. Don't leave me alone." The words came out panicked. Nathan came back to the bed and cupped her face in his hands. "I'll be as fast as I can, I promise, and Mary will be here in minutes. You're going to be fine. The baby is going to be fine. Just breathe through the pains until help arrives." He kissed her hard and then was gone, and Beatrice heard him running down the stairs and out the door. She lay in the bed, trying to remember everything she had heard about childbirth, trying to stay calm. The pains were coming more regularly now, each one stronger than the last. True to Nathan's word, Mary arrived within 5 minutes, a capable woman in her 50s who had raised 7 children of her own. She assessed the situation with practiced efficiency and got Beatrice up and walking, saying movement would help things progress. "First babies can take a while," Mary said as they paced the bedroom. "But based on how strong these pains are already, I'd say this little one is eager to meet you." Nathan returned with the midwife, Mrs. Patterson, just as dawn was breaking. By then, Beatrice was in serious labor, the pains coming fast and hard. Nathan wanted to stay with her, but Mrs. Patterson shooed him out of the room with firm orders to boil water and gather clean linens. The next hours were a blur of pain and effort, of Mary and Mrs. Patterson coaching her through each contraction, of wondering if her body would survive this. She thought about Thomas, about how he would never meet this child, and she thought about Nathan, waiting anxiously downstairs, ready to be a father to a baby that was not his by blood but would be his in every way that mattered. "One more push," Mrs. Patterson commanded. "The baby's almost here." Beatrice bore down with everything she had, and suddenly the pressure was gone and a baby's cry filled the room. She fell back against the pillows, exhausted and exhilarated. "It's a boy," Mrs. Patterson announced, placing the squalling infant on Beatrice's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." Beatrice looked down at her son, at his red face and flailing fists, and felt love crash over her like a wave. "Hello, Benjamin," she whispered. "Welcome to the world. Should I get your husband?" Mary asked, already heading for the door. "Yes, please." Nathan appeared moments later, his face pale and worried. "Are you all right? Is the baby okay?" "We're both fine. Come meet your son." Beatrice held out her hand to him. Nathan approached the bed slowly, as if he was afraid he might break the spell. When he saw the baby, his expression transformed into something Beatrice had never seen before. Pure, unguarded love. "He's perfect," Nathan breathed. "Can I hold him?" Beatrice carefully transferred the bundled baby to Nathan's arms, and she watched as her husband cradled the infant with surprising confidence. "Hello, Benjamin," Nathan said softly. "I'm your papa. I'm going to love you and protect you every single day of your life. That's a promise." Beatrice felt tears streaming down her face, but they were good tears, happy tears. This moment, watching Nathan hold their son, was everything she had not dared to hope for 6 months ago. She had thought her life was over when Thomas died. She had thought she would never be whole again. But looking at Nathan and Benjamin, she realized she had been wrong. She was not the same person she had been before, but she was complete in a new way. She was a mother. She was a wife. She was loved, and she was capable of loving in return. "Thank you," Nathan said, looking up at her with shining eyes. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving us this." "Thank you for loving us," Beatrice replied. "Both of us." Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, still holding Benjamin, and leaned over to kiss Beatrice gently. "Always. I'll always love you both." The weeks following Benjamin's birth were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. The baby was demanding, waking every few hours to eat and needing constant attention. But Nathan threw himself into fatherhood with the same dedication he showed everything else. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with Benjamin in the middle of the night, and looked at his son with such adoration that it made Beatrice's heart ache in the best way. "You're a natural at this," she told him one evening as she watched him bathe Benjamin with careful attention. "I'm terrified I'm going to break him," Nathan admitted. "He's so small. But you do it anyway. That's what makes you a good father." Beatrice came to stand beside him, running her finger over Benjamin's tiny hand. The baby gripped it instinctively. "He already knows you. Look at how calm he is with you. He knows we both love him. That's what matters." Nathan dried Benjamin carefully and handed him to Beatrice to dress. "I was thinking, once the spring thaw comes, we should take him into town and have a proper photograph made, something we can show him when he's older." "I'd like that." Beatrice dressed Benjamin in a soft nightgown that one of the ranch wives had made as a gift. The community had rallied around them after the baby's birth, bringing food and supplies and handmade baby items. It was the kind of support Beatrice had never had before, and it made her realize how much she had come to belong here. "Nathan, do you ever regret this? Taking on a pregnant widow and another man's child?" Nathan looked at her with such intensity that she felt it like a physical touch. "Never. Not for one single second. Beatrice, you and Benjamin are the best things that ever happened to me. I was just existing before you came along, building a ranch but not building a life. You gave me a reason to come home at night. You gave me a family. You gave me the same thing." Beatrice settled into the rocking chair they had brought into the bedroom, cradling Benjamin against her chest. "I was so broken when we met. I thought I would never heal from losing Thomas, never trust anyone again. But you were so patient, so steady. You showed me that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. You were never worthless. You were strong and brave, and you just needed someone to see that." Nathan knelt beside the rocking chair, one hand on Beatrice's knee and the other resting gently on Benjamin's back. "I love you, Beatrice Jenkins, more every single day. I love you too." The words were easy now, natural. "I never thought I'd say that again after Thomas died, but you made it possible." Benjamin chose that moment to fall asleep, his tiny face peaceful and perfect. Nathan and Beatrice sat there in the lamplight, watching their son sleep, and Beatrice thought about how far she had come. 7 months ago, she had been standing outside a general store in the cold, desperate and alone. Now she was warm and safe, surrounded by love, holding a healthy baby while her husband looked at them both like they were the most precious things in the world. Life was not perfect. She still had moments when grief for Thomas would hit her unexpectedly. She still worried about money and the future, about whether she was a good enough mother, about all the things that could go wrong. But she had learned that being scared did not mean giving up. It meant facing each day anyway, trusting that love was stronger than fear. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked softly. "About how you once told me to let you love my broken pieces," Beatrice said. "About how you've done exactly that and how it's made me stronger instead of weaker." "You were always strong. I just gave you a safe place to show it." Nathan stood and helped her up from the rocking chair. "Come on, let's get you both to bed. Tomorrow's another day." They settled into bed together, Benjamin in a cradle next to Beatrice's side where she could reach him easily. Nathan pulled Beatrice into his arms, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling his heartbeat steady and sure beneath her ear. "Nathan," she murmured, already half asleep. "Thank you for finding me that day. Thank you for offering me a chance when no one else would. Thank you for taking it. Thank you for trusting me." He kissed the top of her head. "Now sleep. Morning comes early when you have a baby in the house." Beatrice smiled and let herself drift off, secure in the knowledge that she would wake up loved and safe. It was more than she had dared to dream of, and it was everything she needed. Spring came to the high country with an explosion of wildflowers and new calves. The ranch was busy with all the work that came with the season, but Nathan had hired extra help so Beatrice could focus on Benjamin. At 3 months old, the baby was starting to smile and coo, responding to Nathan's voice with obvious delight. One afternoon in early April, Nathan came into the house looking troubled. Beatrice was in the kitchen, preparing dinner while Benjamin napped in a basket nearby. She knew immediately something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "I was in town picking up supplies. There was a stranger asking questions at the saloon." Nathan's voice was carefully controlled. "He was asking about Thomas. About whether he had any family, whether his widow was still in town." Fear shot through Beatrice. What kind of stranger? The dangerous kind. Dark suit, careful questions, money to spend on information. Nathan came to her and took her hands. "Beatrice, I think the men Thomas was involved with are looking for you. But I don't know anything. I can't tell them anything about Thomas's business. I know that, and you know that, but they don't." Nathan's jaw was tight. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you or Benjamin. I've already talked to the sheriff, and I've put extra guards on the ranch. But I need you to promise me you won't leave the property without me, or at least 2 of the hands with you. You think I'm in real danger." Beatrice's voice shook slightly. "I think we need to be careful until we know what this man wants." Nathan pulled her into his arms, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby. "I also think it's time I stopped asking polite questions and started demanding real answers. Someone in this town knows what Thomas was involved in, and someone knows who killed him. It's time they told us. Nathan, please don't put yourself in danger for this. I'm not going to do anything reckless, but I'm also not going to stand by while someone threatens my family." His voice was firm. "You and Benjamin are my priority. Everything else is secondary." That night, after Benjamin was asleep and they were in bed, Nathan told Beatrice his plan. He had been cultivating information sources in town for months, carefully building a network of people who owed him favors or trusted him. Now he was going to call in those favors and demand they tell him everything they knew about Thomas's death and the men he had been involved with. "There's a man who runs a freight company in town, Harry Morrison. He handles shipments for all the big mining operations," Nathan explained. "He's a good man, honest, but he sees and hears things. I helped him out last year when a supplier tried to cheat him. He owes me, and I'm going to ask him to tell me everything he knows about the gambling rings and information brokers in Fairplay." Do you really think he'll know anything useful? I think in a town this size, everyone knows something. It's just a matter of asking the right questions of the right people. Nathan stroked her hair absently. I also talked to Hank. He's been around these parts for 20 years. He remembers when Thomas first came to town, and he says Thomas was asking questions about the mining operations, who was investing, who was pulling out. That's valuable information to the right buyers. Beatrice tried to reconcile this picture of Thomas with the charming man who had swept her off her feet. I feel like I didn't know him at all. You knew the part of him that loved you. That was real, Beatrice. Whatever else he was involved in, his feelings for you were genuine. I believe that. Nathan pulled her closer. But he put you in danger, knowingly or not, and now we have to deal with the consequences. What if we can't figure out what they want? What if they come after Benjamin? Her worst fear spoken aloud. Then we leave. I'll sell the ranch, and we'll go somewhere far away where no one can find us. Montana, maybe, or Oregon. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you both safe. Nathan's voice was absolute. But I don't think it will come to that. I think once we figure out what Thomas was involved in, we can find a way to convince these people you're not a threat. I hope you're right. So do I. Nathan spent the next week conducting his investigation with single-minded determination. He talked to Harry Morrison, to bartenders and shopkeepers, to miners and freight handlers. He pieced together a picture of Thomas's activities that was both impressive and troubling. Thomas had been selling information about mining operations to competing companies, helping them know which claims were profitable and which investors were pulling out. It was not illegal exactly, but it was unethical, and it made powerful men angry. More than that, Thomas had apparently been working for a man named Carson Reed, a Denver businessman with ties to several mining operations. When Thomas tried to back out of their arrangement after marrying Beatrice, Reed had sent someone to teach him a lesson. The lesson had gone too far. Reed didn't mean for Thomas to die, Nathan explained to Beatrice after returning from his final information-gathering trip. At least, that's what my sources say. He just wanted to scare Thomas into continuing to work for him. But the man he sent was overzealous, and things went wrong. Once Thomas was dead, Reed decided to cut his losses and disappear. But now he's worried that Thomas might have told you something that could expose his whole operation. So what do we do? Beatrice felt oddly calm, now that she finally understood the full picture. We send a message to Reed, through channels that I've identified, that you don't know anything and you're not a threat. That Thomas never told you about his business, and that you have no interest in causing trouble. You just want to be left alone to raise your baby in peace. Nathan took her hands, and we make it clear that if anything happens to you, I have instructions to release everything I've learned to the territorial marshal and the major newspapers. We make the cost of coming after you higher than the benefit. Will that work? It should. Reed is a businessman. He'll make the practical choice. Nathan's expression was grim. And if he doesn't, then we proceed to Plan B. We leave and we don't look back. Nathan sent the message through Harry Morrison, who had connections to Reed's organization. Then they waited. It was the hardest week of Beatrice's life, constantly wondering if danger was coming, if every sound outside meant someone was there to hurt them. But Nathan was a constant presence, reassuring and solid, and the ranch hands had clearly been told to keep extra watch because there was always someone nearby. Finally, after 8 days, Harry came to the ranch himself. Beatrice and Nathan met him in the front parlor, Benjamin sleeping peacefully upstairs, unaware of the drama unfolding around him. Reed got the message, Harry said without preamble. He's agreed to leave Mrs. Jenkins alone, provided she never speaks about Thomas's involvement in his business. He considers the matter closed. Beatrice felt her knees go weak with relief. It's over, Harry confirmed. Reed has moved his operations to California anyway. He has no reason to bother you anymore, and I made it very clear that doing so would be more trouble than it's worth. He looked at Nathan with respect. You've got a good man here, Mrs. Jenkins. He was willing to go up against some dangerous people to protect you. I know, Beatrice said, looking at her husband with love. I'm very lucky. After Harry left, Nathan pulled Beatrice into his arms and just held her. She felt the tension drain from his body, realized how worried he had actually been even though he had hidden it well. It's really over, she whispered against his chest. It's really over. You're safe. Benjamin is safe. We can finally just focus on being a family. Nathan's voice was rough with emotion. You could have been killed investigating all of this. Those men are dangerous. But I wasn't. And now we know the truth. Now you have answers about what happened to Thomas and you can finally have closure. He pulled back to look at her face. No more looking over your shoulder. No more wondering. Just us and our future. Beatrice thought about Thomas, about the man she had married so impulsively and lost so quickly. She had loved him, but it had been a young love, built on dreams rather than reality. What she had with Nathan was different. It was built on truth and trust, on seeing each other's flaws and choosing each other anyway. It was built on the kind of love that survived hardship and came out stronger. I'm ready to let go of the past, she said. I'm ready to just be here with you, building our life. Nathan smiled, that brilliant smile that transformed his whole face. Then let's do that. Let's just be happy, and they were. As spring turned to summer and summer to fall, Beatrice and Nathan settled into a rhythm that felt like contentment. Benjamin grew from an infant to a busy toddler, crawling everywhere and getting into everything. The ranch prospered, with a good calf crop and healthy cattle prices. Beatrice expanded her role, taking over the ranch accounts and proving to have a good head for business. Nathan treated her as a full partner in every decision, and together, they made plans for the future. On a cool October evening, almost exactly 2 years after Beatrice had first stood outside the general store in Fairplay, she and Nathan sat on the porch watching Benjamin play with a wooden horse Nathan had carved for him. The mountains were painted gold and crimson with fall colors, and the air smelled of wood smoke and coming winter. You remember the day we met? Beatrice asked. Every detail, Nathan replied. You were standing there looking so lost and so determined at the same time. I knew right then that I wanted to know you. I thought you were crazy, offering me a job like that. I almost said no. I'm glad you didn't. Nathan pulled her closer on the porch swing. You've made my life so much richer, Beatrice. You and Benjamin both. You saved me, Beatrice said simply. When I said I would never be whole again, I meant it. I felt broken into pieces that could never fit back together. But you loved those broken pieces until they didn't feel broken anymore. You helped me become someone new. You saved yourself, Nathan corrected gently. I just gave you a safe place to do it. You're the one who chose to trust again, to love again, to build a new life. That took incredible courage. Beatrice watched Benjamin, her beautiful boy who would never know his birth father but who would grow up loved and secure. She thought about the baby she was carrying now, not yet showing but definitely there, a new life created in love and hope. She thought about the home she and Nathan had built together, both the physical ranch and the emotional foundation of their marriage. I never thought I could be this happy again, she admitted. After Thomas died, I thought happiness was something that had happened in my past, not something that could be part of my future. And now, Nathan asked, now I know that happiness isn't something that happens to you. It's something you build day by day, with someone who sees you completely and loves you anyway. Beatrice turned to look at her husband, at the man who had offered her a job and then his heart, who had loved her baby as his own and was now giving her another child. "I love you, Nathan Jenkins. More than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. I love you too, Beatrice Jenkins, always." He kissed her softly, and Benjamin looked up from his playing to giggle at his parents. "Papa, Mama," he called, running over on unsteady legs. Nathan scooped him up and settled him between them on the swing, and they sat there as a family, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Beatrice thought about the journey that had brought her here, about the loss and pain and fear that had preceded this moment of perfect contentment. She thought about Thomas, hoping wherever he was, he knew that his son was loved and safe. She thought about the younger version of herself who had stood in the cold, desperate and alone, and she wished she could tell that girl that everything would be okay. That she would find someone who would love her broken pieces. That she would be whole again, just in a different way. The winter that followed was harsh, with heavy snows and bitter cold, but the Jenkins family weathered it together. Benjamin had his second birthday in January, and Beatrice's pregnancy progressed smoothly. Nathan had expanded the house, adding a proper nursery and another bedroom, planning for the family he hoped they would continue to grow. "How many children do you want?" Beatrice asked him one snowy evening as they sat by the fire, Benjamin asleep upstairs. "As many as you're willing to have," Nathan replied with a grin. "I like the idea of a house full of children, the sound of laughter and running feet, a legacy to leave behind when we're old and gray." "That sounds nice." Beatrice rested her hand on her swelling belly. "I hope this one is a girl. Benjamin needs a sister to torment him." "Boy or girl, they'll be loved," Nathan said, placing his hand over hers. "Just like Benjamin is loved, just like you're loved." Their daughter was born on a warm April morning, coming into the world with a healthy cry that announced her presence to everyone in the house. She had Nathan's gray eyes and Beatrice's dark hair, and when Nathan held her for the first time, he cried tears of joy. "Grace," he said, looking at Beatrice with wonder. "She's perfect. She really is." Beatrice was exhausted but elated, watching her husband cradle their daughter with the same careful attention he had shown Benjamin. "We're a family of 4 now." "Best family in Colorado," Nathan declared, and Benjamin, who had been allowed in to meet his new sister, nodded seriously. "Baby," he said, patting Grace's tiny hand gently. "My baby." "Our baby," Beatrice corrected. "You're a big brother now, Benjamin. That's an important job." As spring turned to summer, Beatrice marveled at how full her life had become. 2 years ago, she had been certain her life was over. Now she had 2 beautiful children, a husband who adored her, and a home that was truly hers. The ranch continued to prosper, and Nathan had started talking about expanding their operation, maybe buying adjacent land that had come up for sale. "We could double our herd," he explained over dinner one evening. "Build a real cattle empire to pass down to Benjamin and Grace." "It sounds wonderful," Beatrice agreed. "But let's make sure we can manage it without losing our minds. I like having time to spend with you and the children." "You're right. There's no point in building an empire if we don't have time to enjoy it." Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. "I never want to lose sight of what's really important, this family, this life we've built together." That summer, they took the family photograph Nathan had talked about years earlier. They dressed in their best clothes and went to the photographer's studio in Fairplay, Benjamin squirming in his suit while Grace slept peacefully in Beatrice's arms. The resulting photograph showed a young family, happy and healthy, with love evident in every detail. Beatrice had it framed and hung it in the parlor, a reminder of how far they had come. As the years passed, the Jenkins family continued to grow and thrive. Benjamin grew into a sturdy boy who loved the ranch and followed his father everywhere, learning the business from the ground up. Grace was a sunny, cheerful child who brightened every room she entered. Two more children followed, a boy they named Samuel and another girl they named Hope, each one welcomed with joy and love. Beatrice sometimes took out the photograph from that first summer, looking at the younger version of herself holding baby Grace and marveling at the change in her own face. The haunted look was gone, replaced by contentment and confidence. She was a wife, a mother, a rancher. She was whole, not in the way she had been before Thomas died, but in a new and better way. Nathan never let her forget how proud he was of her. He told her constantly that she was the strongest person he knew, that she had taken tragedy and turned it into triumph. He loved her with a steadiness that never wavered, through good times and hard times, through illnesses and accidents, and the everyday struggles of raising a family and running a ranch. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised her with a trip to Denver, leaving the children with Hank and his wife. They stayed in a nice hotel and went to the theater, dressing up and acting like the young couple they still were in their hearts. "This is wonderful," Beatrice said as they walked back to the hotel after the show, her arm linked through his. "But I'll be happy to get home to the children." "Me too," Nathan admitted. "As nice as this is, I miss the chaos of home. I miss Benjamin's questions and Grace's singing and the babies getting into everything." "We've built a good life," Beatrice said. "Better than I ever imagined possible, we have, and it's only going to get better." Nathan stopped walking and pulled her close. "I love you, Beatrice. Thank you for taking a chance on me 10 years ago. Thank you for trusting me with your broken pieces." "Thank you for loving them," Beatrice replied. "Thank you for showing me that being broken doesn't mean being worthless, that love can heal even the deepest wounds." They kissed there on the Denver street, two people who had found each other when they both needed it most, and had built something beautiful from their pain. The years continued to pass, and the Jenkins children grew. Benjamin turned into a tall, capable young man who took over more and more of the ranch responsibilities. Grace became a skilled horsewoman and a talented artist. Samuel showed a head for business that impressed his father. Hope lived up to her name, bringing joy to everyone around her. Beatrice and Nathan aged together, their hair graying and their bodies showing the wear of years of hard work. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew deeper and stronger, rooted in shared history and mutual respect. One evening, when Beatrice was 50 and Nathan was 53, they sat on the same porch where they had spent so many evenings over the years. Benjamin was married now, living in the house with his wife and their baby daughter, taking over the day-to-day running of the ranch. Grace was engaged to a teacher from town. Samuel was preparing to go to college in Denver to study business. Hope was still at home, 17 and full of dreams. "We did it," Nathan said, taking Beatrice's hand. "We raised 4 good children, built a successful ranch, and were still in love after all these years." "We did," Beatrice agreed. "Sometimes I still think about that day you found me outside the general store. I was so lost and so scared." "And so brave," Nathan added. "You were the bravest person I'd ever met, even if you didn't realize it." "You saved my life that day," Beatrice said seriously. "Not just by giving me a job, but by giving me hope. By showing me that I could be loved again, that I could build a new life from the ruins of the old one." "You saved mine too," Nathan countered. "I was just existing before you came along. You gave me a purpose, a family, a reason to build something that would last." Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder, comfortable and content. "Do you remember what I said that first day? That I would never be whole again. I remember. I was wrong. I am whole, just differently than I was before." She squeezed his hand. "You helped me understand that being broken doesn't mean being unfixable. It just means being human." "And I meant what I said in response," Nathan murmured. "That I would love your broken pieces. And I have. Every single day for the past 27 years. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Inside the house, they could hear Hope playing piano and the baby crying and Benjamin talking to his wife. The sounds of family, the sounds of home, the sounds of a life well lived. Beatrice thought about Thomas sometimes still, with fondness rather than pain. He had given her Benjamin, who had grown into a wonderful man. He had been her first love, even if that love had been brief and complicated. But Nathan was her true love, the man who had seen her at her lowest and had chosen to lift her up. The man who had promised to love her broken pieces and had kept that promise every single day. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, as he had so many times over the years. "About how grateful I am," Beatrice replied. "About how lucky I am to have found you, to have built this life with you. About how what I thought was an ending was actually a beginning." "The best beginning," Nathan agreed. He kissed the top of her head, and Beatrice felt the same flutter of love she had felt on their wedding day, on the day Benjamin was born, on every important day of their life together. They had built something beautiful from pain and loss. They had proven that love could heal even the deepest wounds. They had shown that being broken was not the end of the story, but rather the beginning of a new chapter. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Nathan and Beatrice sat together, two people who had found wholeness in each other's arms. The cowboy who had offered love to a broken woman, and the woman who had been brave enough to accept it. Together, they had created a legacy of love that would continue long after they were gone, through their children and grandchildren and all the generations to come. And in that moment, sitting on the porch of the home they had built together, Beatrice Sullivan Jenkins knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Whole, loved, and home at last. The ranch continued to thrive under Benjamin's capable management, but Nathan and Beatrice remained involved, offering advice and wisdom when asked, but mostly enjoying their role as grandparents. They had 5 grandchildren now, with more on the way, and they loved spoiling each one. Grace's wedding was a beautiful affair, held at the ranch with half the county in attendance. Beatrice cried happy tears as she watched her daughter marry a good man who looked at Grace the way Nathan had always looked at Beatrice, with love and respect and wonder. Samuel graduated from college with honors and returned to help expand the ranch's business operations, implementing new techniques and technologies. Hope decided she wanted to become a teacher and moved to Denver to attend teacher training college. Through it all, Nathan and Beatrice remained each other's anchors. They took long walks around the ranch property, remembering different moments from their years together. They sat up late talking, sharing dreams and memories and plans for the future. They held hands at church and during family dinners, a constant physical reminder of their connection. On a crisp autumn morning, 30 years after that first meeting in Fairplay, Beatrice woke to find Nathan watching her with a soft smile. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, brushing a strand of gray hair from her face. "Good morning, handsome," she replied, as she had every morning for 3 decades. "What are you thinking about? About how I almost didn't talk to you that day? About how I almost kept riding past, telling myself it wasn't my business if some woman was standing in the cold." Nathan's voice was serious. "About how different my life would be if I had made that choice. But you didn't." Beatrice cupped his weathered face in her hand. "You stopped. You offered help. You changed both our lives." "Best decision I ever made," Nathan said, Loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life. Loving you has been my salvation, Beatrice replied. You took a broken woman and showed her she could be whole again. You loved a child that wasn't yours as if he was your own flesh and blood. You built a home and a family and a life that's better than anything I could have dreamed. We built it together, Nathan corrected. Every step of the way we were partners. That evening, the whole family gathered for Sunday dinner, a tradition they had maintained for years. The house was full of noise and laughter, children running and adults talking and food being passed around the table. Beatrice looked around at the faces she loved, at the family that had grown from that day she had stood alone and desperate in fair play, and she felt her heart overflow with gratitude. Benjamin was at the head of the table, his wife beside him and their children around them. Grace and her husband were expecting their third child. Samuel was courting a nice girl from Denver. Hope was home for a visit, full of stories about her students. And Nathan sat across from Beatrice, catching her eye and smiling, sharing this moment of perfect contentment. After dinner, when the dishes were done and the children had been put to bed, Nathan found Beatrice in the parlor. She was looking at the old photograph from their first summer together, the one that showed them young and hopeful with baby Grace in her arms. "We were so young," she murmured as Nathan came to stand beside her. "We were, but we knew what mattered even then." He wrapped his arms around her from behind and she leaned back against him. "We knew that love was worth fighting for, that family was worth building. That broken pieces could become something beautiful when they were put together with care." Beatrice turned in his arms to face him. "I never thanked you properly, you know, for that first day, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for offering me hope when I had none left. You've thanked me every day for 30 years just by being you, by loving me and building this life with me and giving me more happiness than any man deserves." Nathan kissed her forehead. "Besides, you saved me just as much as I saved you. Before you, I was building a ranch but not a life. You showed me the difference." "Then we saved each other," Beatrice said. "Two broken people who put each other back together." "Not broken," Nathan corrected gently, as he had so many times over the years. "Just human, just real, just perfectly imperfect and perfectly right for each other." As they stood there in the lamplight, holding each other in the home they had built, Beatrice thought about the woman she had been 30 years ago. That woman had believed she would never be whole again, that her life had ended with Thomas's death. That woman had been wrong. She had become whole again, just not in the way she expected. She had healed, grown, transformed. She had learned that love comes in many forms, that family can be built as well as born, that endings can become beginnings if you are brave enough to take the chance. And she had learned, perhaps most importantly, that being broken is not the opposite of being whole. Sometimes you have to break to let the light in. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what really matters. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the words, "Let me love your broken pieces." Nathan had loved her broken pieces and in doing so had helped her become whole again. Not the same as before, but better, stronger, more complete. As winter settled over the Colorado mountains once again, the Jenkins family continued their traditions. Sunday dinners, holiday celebrations, working together to keep the ranch prosperous. Benjamin and his brothers took over more of the physical work, but Nathan remained the heart and soul of the operation, the man whose vision and hard work had built something worth passing down. Beatrice spent her days baking and knitting, tending her garden and writing letters to Hope in Denver. She helped with the grandchildren, teaching them to cook and sharing stories about the early days of the ranch. She sat on the porch in the afternoons, watching the mountains change with the light, feeling grateful for every single day she had been given. One snowy evening in December, as they celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary, Nathan gave Beatrice a small wooden box. Inside was a piece of paper, worn and folded. "What is this?" she asked, unfolding it carefully. "The receipt from the day I hired you," Nathan said. "I kept it all these years. A reminder of the day my life really began." Beatrice looked at the faded writing, documenting the transaction that had changed everything. One cook, $30 a month, room and board included. Such a simple document, but it represented so much more. It represented hope and second chances. It represented a man who saw past surface appearances to the strength beneath. It represented the beginning of a love story that had lasted more than 3 decades. "I love you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I will love you until my dying day and beyond." "And I love you," Nathan replied. "My beautiful, brave, strong wife. The woman who took my offer of a job and gave me a family. The woman who trusted me with her broken pieces and let me help make her whole." They renewed their vows that night, speaking the words from memory, promises they had kept faithfully for 32 years and would continue to keep for all the years to come. Benjamin officiated, standing tall and proud as he watched his parents reaffirm their love. The grandchildren watched with wide eyes, not fully understanding but sensing the importance of the moment. And Grace, beautiful Grace, who had been the beginning of their family, sang a hymn her mother loved, her voice clear and sweet in the warm house. As the celebration wound down and the family slowly dispersed to their beds, Nathan and Beatrice stood at the window, watching the snow fall in the lamplight. "No regrets?" Nathan asked softly. "Not a single one," Beatrice replied. "This life, this family, this love. It's more than I ever dreamed of, more than I thought was possible after Thomas died." "He would be proud," Nathan said, "of the life you've built, of the man Benjamin has become, of how you took tragedy and turned it into triumph." "I hope so." Beatrice thought of Thomas, young and reckless and gone too soon. "I hope he knows that his son is happy and loved, that the legacy he left behind is a good one." "I think he knows." Nathan pulled her close. "And I think he's grateful that you found someone to take care of you, to love you the way you deserve to be loved." They went to bed that night wrapped in each other's arms, as they had every night for 32 years. And as Beatrice drifted off to sleep, she whispered a prayer of thanks for the cowboy who had stopped to help a desperate widow, for the man who had offered to love her broken pieces, for the husband who had kept every promise he had ever made. The years continued their steady march, bringing changes and challenges. Nathan's health began to fail, the hard years of ranch work taking their toll. But he faced aging with the same quiet dignity he faced everything else, never complaining, always grateful for another day with his family. Beatrice tended him with fierce devotion, refusing to let anyone else take care of him. They had faced everything together for 35 years, and she was not about to stop now. "You don't have to do this," Nathan told her one morning as she helped him dress. "The children would understand if you needed help." "I'm not doing it because I have to," Beatrice replied. "I'm doing it because I want to, because you spent 35 years taking care of me and now it's my turn to take care of you." "I never took care of you," Nathan protested. "We took care of each other." "Exactly, and that's what we're still doing." She kissed him gently. "Now stop arguing and let me button this shirt." They had 3 more years together, years filled with grandchildren's laughter and quiet conversations and memories shared and created. Years that Beatrice treasured every single day, knowing they were precious and finite. When Nathan finally passed, on a warm spring morning with Beatrice holding his hand and the whole family gathered around, his last words were, "Thank you for loving me." And Beatrice replied through tears, "Thank you for teaching me how." The grief was intense but different from what she had felt when Thomas died. With Thomas, she had felt lost and alone, adrift in a world that made no sense. With Nathan, she felt sad but anchored, mourning the loss of her partner but secure in the love they had shared and the legacy they had built. The family rallied around her, just as they always had. Benjamin insisted she continue living in the main house, refusing to let her move to one of the smaller buildings. The grandchildren visited constantly, filling the house with noise and life. Grace and Samuel and Hope came home as often as they could, surrounding their mother with love and support. And slowly, Beatrice healed, not by forgetting Nathan or moving on, but by carrying his love with her as she continued living. She told stories about him to the grandchildren, keeping his memory alive. She continued the traditions they had established. She found purpose in being a grandmother, a mother, a matriarch of the family they had built together. On what would have been their 40th wedding anniversary, Beatrice went to Nathan's grave, a peaceful spot on a hill overlooking the ranch. She brought wildflowers, the kind he used to pick for her in the early days of their courtship. "I miss you," she told him, speaking out loud as if he could hear. "Every single day I miss you, but I'm okay, Nathan. You left me strong enough to survive without you, even though I never wanted to have to. You gave me a family and a home and a legacy. You gave me 40 years of love and partnership and laughter. You gave me everything." She sat there for a long time, feeling the sun on her face and the breeze in her hair, feeling Nathan's presence in the land around her. He was gone, but he was also everywhere, in every building he had built, in every fence he had mended, in every child and grandchild who carried his genes or his teachings or his love. When Beatrice finally stood to leave, she felt at peace. She had been broken twice in her life, once by Thomas's death and once by Nathan's. But both times, she had healed. Both times, she had found a way to continue to build a new life from the ruins of the old. Nathan had taught her that. He had shown her that being broken was not a permanent state but a temporary condition. That love could heal even the deepest wounds. That "I'll never be whole again" was not a prophecy but a challenge, one that could be overcome with patience and care and the right partner. "Thank you," she whispered to the wind. "Thank you for loving my broken pieces. Thank you for showing me I could be whole again." And she walked back down the hill to the house full of family, to the life she and Nathan had built together, to the legacy that would continue long after she was gone. She was 73 years old, a widow for the second time, a mother and grandmother and great-grandmother. She was whole, not the same as she had been at 23, standing desperate and alone outside a general store. Not the same as she had been at 53, dancing in Nathan's arms on their 30th anniversary. But whole nonetheless, complete in herself and in the love she had shared and the family she had raised. The cowboy had offered to love her broken pieces, and in doing so, had helped her become someone who no longer needed that offer. Someone who was strong enough to stand on her own, secure enough to love deeply, wise enough to know that being broken and being whole were not opposites, but rather different aspects of the same human experience. And as the sun set behind the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Beatrice Sullivan Jenkins stood on the porch of the home she had shared with Nathan for 40 years, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived, and smiled. She was whole. She was loved. She was home. The final years of Beatrice's life were peaceful and full. She watched Benjamin's children grow and have children of their own, extending the family tree in directions she could never have imagined. She attended weddings and christenings and birthday parties, always the guest of honor, always surrounded by love. On her 80th birthday, the family threw a huge celebration at the ranch. Everyone came, even distant relatives and old friends, to honor the woman who had built this family from nothing but determination and love. There were speeches and toasts, and a cake big enough to feed half the county. Samuel, now a successful businessman who still managed the ranch's finances, stood to speak about his mother. "Most of you know my mother's story," he said. "How she came to this ranch as a pregnant widow with nothing but the clothes on her back. How my father offered her a job and then his heart. How they built this family and this legacy together." He paused, looking at Beatrice with love. "But what you might not know is what my father told me shortly before he died. He said that marrying my mother was the easiest decision he ever made, because he could see her strength even when she couldn't. He said she was the bravest person he ever met, because she kept going even when she thought she was broken beyond repair." Samuel's voice broke slightly. "Dad also told me that the greatest gift my mother ever gave him was the chance to love her. Not because she needed saving, but because she was worth loving. And I think that's something we should all remember. Mom didn't need Dad to fix her. She needed him to stand beside her while she fixed herself. And that's exactly what he did." There was not a dry eye in the house as Samuel finished his speech. Beatrice stood, tears streaming down her face, and hugged her son tight. "Your father would be so proud of you," she whispered. "Of all of you. You've all become exactly the kind of people he hoped you would be." As the celebration continued around her, Beatrice found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her here. 57 years ago, she had been standing outside a general store, convinced her life was over. 44 years ago, she had married Nathan, taking a chance on love when everything in her screamed to protect herself. 16 years ago, Nathan had died, and she had thought she might die too from grief and loss. But she had survived all of it. She had thrived even. And now, at 80 years old, she was surrounded by evidence that her life had mattered, that the choices she made and the love she shared had created ripples that would extend far beyond her years. That night, lying in the bed she had once shared with Nathan, Beatrice felt him near. Not in any supernatural way, but in the memories that filled every corner of this room, this house, this ranch. In the way the moonlight fell across the floor, just as it had on so many nights when they had lain together talking. In the sound of the wind in the trees, the same wind that had blown on that first day when Nathan offered her a job and, unknowingly, a future. "I did it," she whispered to the darkness, to Nathan's memory, to herself. "I lived the life we planned. I raised our children and loved our grandchildren and kept our legacy alive. And I did it while staying whole, just like you promised I could." She closed her eyes, feeling at peace in a way she had not felt since Nathan died. She had fulfilled every promise, lived every dream, loved every moment. She was ready, whenever her time came, to let go. That time came 3 months later, on a warm summer morning not unlike the morning Nathan had died. Beatrice was sitting on the porch, watching Benjamin work with the cattle in the far pasture, when she felt a sudden certainty that this was her last day. She was not afraid. Instead, she felt almost excited, like she was about to embark on a great adventure. She called the family together, all of them, and they came immediately, sensing something important was happening. When they were all gathered, crowding into the parlor and spilling out onto the porch, Beatrice looked at each of them with love. "I need to tell you all something," she said, her voice still strong despite her age. "I need you to know how grateful I am for each and every one of you. You have been my joy and my purpose. You have made my life full beyond measure." "Mom, you're scaring us," Grace said, holding her mother's hand tight. "Don't be scared, darling. I'm not scared." Beatrice smiled at her beautiful daughter, now a grandmother herself. "I've lived 80 wonderful years. 44 of them with the love of my life and 36 more carrying his love in my heart. I've raised 4 amazing children and watched them raise children of their own. I've built a legacy that will continue long after I'm gone. I have no regrets, no fears, no sadness, only gratitude. Benjamin, her firstborn, the child she had carried in fear and desperation, knelt beside her chair. We love you, Mom, so much. I know. And I love you all. That's what I wanted to say. That I love you, and I'm so proud of every single one of you. Beatrice looked around the room, memorizing each face. Your father and I, we built something good here, not just a ranch, but a family. A place where love matters more than blood, where broken pieces can become whole, where second chances are real. She paused, feeling tired but content. I want you all to remember that. When you face hard times, when you feel broken, when you think you'll never be whole again, remember that love can heal anything. Your father taught me that, and now I'm teaching you. They stayed with her all day, sharing stories and memories and laughter. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose, Beatrice closed her eyes for the last time. Thank you, she whispered, so quietly only those closest could hear. Thank you for loving my broken pieces. Thank you for showing me I could be whole. And then she was gone peacefully, surrounded by the family she had built and the love she had nurtured for more than half a century. The funeral was attended by hundreds, a testament to the impact Beatrice had made on everyone she met. They buried her next to Nathan on the hill overlooking the ranch. 2 headstones side by side marking the resting place of the couple who had built a legacy of love. Benjamin stood at the graveside after everyone else had left, looking at his parents' names carved in granite. Thank you, he said quietly to both of them. Thank you for showing me what love looks like, what family means, what it means to be whole. He placed wildflowers on both graves, the same wildflowers his father used to pick for his mother in the early days of their courtship. And then he walked back down the hill to the house, to his own family, to the legacy he was now responsible for carrying forward. The ranch continued to thrive, generation after generation. Benjamin's children took over, and their children after them, each one carrying forward the values Beatrice and Nathan had instilled. Hard work and honest dealing, love and loyalty. The understanding that being broken is not the end but rather an opportunity for growth. And on quiet evenings, when the family gathered for Sunday dinner or holiday celebrations, someone would always tell the story of how it all began. Of a desperate widow standing in the cold and a cowboy who stopped to help. Of a woman who said, "I'll never be whole again," and a man who replied, "Then let me love your broken pieces." Of 2 people who built something beautiful from pain and loss, who proved that second chances are real and love can heal anything. The story became family legend, passed down through the generations, a reminder that endings can become beginnings, that being broken is not permanent, that love is always worth the risk. And somewhere, in the land between memory and eternity, Beatrice and Nathan danced in the twilight, whole and happy and together again at last, their love story complete but never truly ending, living on in every life they touched and every heart they changed. The cowboy had offered to love the broken pieces, and the woman had been brave enough to accept. Together, they had built something that would last forever, a legacy of love that proved being whole again was not only possible but inevitable. When you had someone willing to stand beside you and believe in your strength even when you could not see it yourself. And that, in the end, was the greatest love story of all.